breaking news, a Fox News alert. President Trump is set to address police officers and prosecutors in Kansas City, Missouri. And he has already today announced some key personnel moves. We are outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. Awaiting the president's remarks, you see the lectern there in the center of your screen. He'll be talking about crime before a very large audience of law enforcement and prosecutors, as I just mentioned. He's expected to begin at any moment. And the U.S. District Attorney there has said, McAllister, the president will talk about crime. But the president will likely talk about other issues, too, and we will bring you that. One of them could be the president's nomination of William Barr to be Attorney General today, or Heather Nauert to be our U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Barr served as AG under President George H.W. Bush. Nauert has been State Department spokeswoman since the early days of the administration. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has more from the North Lawn. John?
A lot of interesting reaction from both people who support Barr and people who do not support Barr. But one thing is for certain, in choosing Barr to be his nominee for the Attorney General to replace Jeff Sessions on a permanent basis, because Matt Whitaker's right there in there now is on an interim basis. The president chose someone with immense experience, somebody of integrity, somebody who enjoys a tremendous amount of respect, and somebody who got a lot of broad bipartisan support the first time around when he was Bush 41's Attorney General back in 1991 to 1993. Certainly, as he was leaving the White House this morning, President Trump said he's a big fan of William Barr. Listen here.
When I went through the process of looking at people, and he was my first choice from day one, respected by Republicans and respected by Democrats. He will be nominated for the United States Attorney General, and hopefully that process will go very quickly, and I think it will go very quickly, and I've seen very good things about him.
The big question here, though, is what impact, if any, might all of this have on the Mueller investigation? Some of the president's outside advisors believe that Barr is a wild card who could, quote, be worse than Sessions when it comes to the Mueller investigation. But Barr does hold some of the same points of view as the president does. Last year, he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post saying that the president made the right call by firing then FBI Director James Comey, saying, quote, I know of no former senior Justice Department official, Democrat or Republican, who does not view Comey's conduct in July to have been a grave usurpation of authority. And here's what William Barr told our Neil Cavuto back in May of 2017. Listen here.
The president certainly is entitled to his choice as FBI director. And while I admire Jim Comey a lot, I think he's contributed a lot to the country. He's enormously gifted. He crossed the basic line back in July.
Barr's also on the same page with the president when it comes to Hillary Clinton, saying last year he saw more reason to investigate Hillary Clinton because of the Uranium One deal than any suspected collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Barr telling the New York Times in November of last year, quote, to the extent it is not pursuing these matters, the department is abdicating its responsibility. The other big nomination, Harris, that you mentioned, that of Heather Nauert for UN ambassador. We were told weeks ago that she had been offered the job. A lot of people came around and denied that, but now she's been nominated by the president, so it looks like it was there all the time. She was the spokesperson at the State Department, still is, since the days of Rex Tillerson, former Fox News correspondent, of course. Not a great amount of foreign policy experience before coming to the State Department, but she's gained a lot since then. The president is a big fan of hers, so is Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and so is Lindsey Graham, who, of course, will be integral to her confirmation. In a statement, Graham saying, quote, I've known Heather for many years. She's a fine and capable person. She was an effective spokeswoman for the Department of State and enjoys the confidence of Secretary Pompeo and President Trump. I'm sure she will perform well at her hearing and look forward to supporting her nomination. Don't know when the nominations will be scheduled for. Not a lot of time left in this month, but they may try to get it in before the new year. Harris?
Yeah, it's a quick month. So I know you had mentioned this last hour, and I'm seeing now, I'm catching a tweet that, and this would be per Bloomberg, but you reported it too, Heather Nauert will not be in the cabinet. We're being told that the new UN ambassador post is being downgraded to a non-cabinet level. That's a report. You had it for us last hour. What more have you learned?
I actually had it weeks ago, but who's counting? It's not
You are.
It's not being downgraded per se.
Okay.
Because the job of UN ambassador has always been subordinate to the Secretary of State in the flowchart of the Department of State. When Nikki Haley took the position, she insisted on it being a cabinet level position, and the president does have discretion to decide which positions are cabinet or which are sub-cabinet. But now they want to return it back to sub-cabinet level, so that when you get those big days at the United Nations Security Council, that Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, would be there sitting across from Sergei Lavrov of Russia and from the Chinese foreign minister, as opposed to having the UN ambassador do it. It's the way that it's always been done.
Okay.
Nikki Haley changed it up, so it's not being reduced.
I knew
it's just
you would
going
know.
back to the way that it's always been.
I knew you would know. And while others may report it in that way of a downgrade, you now have cleared it all up for us. And we have the facts. See, John Roberts, that's why I ask you. Good to see you, my friend. Thank you.
You too.
For more on the president's big personnel moves, we are joined by Congressman Andy Biggs of the great state of Arizona, who serves on the House Judiciary Committee. Let's start out with William Barr. Served in 91-93 for George H.W. Bush. You've got a tremendous amount of experience and texture to what he can bring to the table. An easy nomination process confirmation, you see?
Well, right now, I'd have to say things are still so polarized that that it's going to be tougher than you might think, even though in the past he's been praised and approved by Democrats. I just think anything that touches President Trump elicits some kind of visceral reaction. I'm hopeful that it's quick and it's easy, but I think that there's some meat on that bone. It's going to be a little bit tough.
What do you like about William Barr in terms of what he can bring for right now?
Yeah, I think the fact that he's been staying in tune with what's happening, number one, but also his experience as Attorney General before, I think, is critical. But then he's also been out in the private sector for a substantial period of time, dealing with real-world problems from that angle. I think that's integral to having the experience necessary to be the Attorney General. And I'm hopeful that he will keep some of the promises that the previous Attorney General made to me. So I'm looking forward to his nomination and confirmation.
You know, Congressman, the president has said today that that William Barr was among his first choices anyway. What do you know that the president maybe had looked at? Because he does talk to his confidants when he's going to nominate somebody. We know that from reporting. What do you think he saw in Mr. Barr?
Well, I think he saw a world of experience, and I think that's very important to this president at this time, because I think in some ways he's trying to stabilize certain areas. And I'll be honest with you, the DOJ has not been necessarily cooperative with Congress and our oversight functions. And I think he's looking for someone who understands the relationship and has a long-term experience to be able to qualify that relationship and meet the Congress halfway.
You know, Barr has criticized aspects of the Russia investigation, and I just want to get your quick thoughts on that, because it had looked like earlier in the week maybe Mueller's investigation was kind of toning down and we were going to see an end. We don't really know, because we don't know what he has.
Right. We have no idea really what Mr. Mueller's going to do, and that's part of the problem. I'm not sure. Nobody's seen an unredacted scope letter, so we don't know what Rod Rosenstein gave him authority to do. And so he's been wandering in paths that I think all of us said, well, that doesn't have anything to do with conspiracy with Russia to impact the election. I think having a strong attorney general there will actually bring some oversight into that. And I think people need to understand, nobody's talking about pulling the plug on the Mueller investigation, but there needs to be some kind of constraints and bring him back into the mold that he was supposed to be in. And I think that's one of the aspects that I like of this nomination.
Oh, that's very interesting. Meanwhile, and I've been talking about it, and let's jump right in. A busy Friday afternoon we're expecting with regard to the Russia probe. Robert Mueller is due to file those sentencing memos, just like he did with Michael Flynn. He'll do so now with Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, which could reveal how Manafort violated his plea deal, because we learned about that last week. Maybe give more details about how much Michael Cohen cooperated with the special counsel. Mueller released similar documents, as I mentioned, on Michael Flynn. Heavily redacted, though, so we can't get too far over our skis. Congressman, your thoughts?
Well, I think we're going to see another page filled with black lines going through it so nobody can read what's underneath it. That was the main thing I got out of the Flynn report, is that what is there? I mean, nobody knows really. And that's part of the thing that's just disappointed all of us so very much, is the amount of redacted information. And in a constitutional republic like we have, I think we want to know that information. I think the American people want to know it, and certainly Congress needs to know it. And I expect that you're going to see a lot of that in the Manafort. I don't know that you'll see as much in the Cohen, but I think you will in the Manafort.
Are you looking for those veins that kind of lead back to the heart of the investigation? I mean, we're so far afield in many ways. Do these memos, however redacted, do they help you with that process or not?
Well, what they tell me is that like the Flynn case, as I read the unredacted portions and the redacted portions, I said, well, you know, this really doesn't have much to do with the 2016 election and Russian interference in that election. And I think we're going to see the same thing in Manafort and Cohen. And so I'm like you. I'm looking for some tie-in with the original purpose of this special counsel, and I haven't seen it. And I think that's particularly vexing to those of us in Congress who say that Mr. Mueller has far exceeded the scope of what he was supposed to look at.
All right, Congressman, we are waiting the president to take the lectern in Kansas City, and I appreciate you being here talking about some of the issues that he may even touch on in a speech today. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you, Harris. Thanks.
I want to bring in now Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, former counsel to the Assistant Attorney General under Bush 43. Hans, a pleasure to see you today. And again, I mentioned we may be interrupted by the president because we are fully expecting him to arrive at this venue in Kansas City, Missouri after seeing him on the tarmac. He's well within a few minutes of that now, so I may break away from that. But I first of all want to mention to the audience, you know William Barr. That's what my team mentioned to me. And I want to get some of the history there with the president's nominee for Attorney General from you.
Well, look, as the congressman said, he's highly respected. He's very qualified. But the key thing for the president, I'm sure, is the fact that, everybody's talking about his 2 years of experience as the 77th Attorney General of the United States. But he had 5 years of experience at the Justice Department, including, by the way, as the Deputy AG. That's the #2 slot currently held by Rod Rosenstein. That's very important because it means that he's not going to have a learning curve. He knows the Justice Department inside and out, which means he's going to be able to hit the ground running as soon as he is confirmed. And by the way, all 3 of those positions that he held inside the Justice Department, he had to be confirmed by the Senate. He was unanimously confirmed to be the Attorney General. And in all 3 positions, it was a Democratic-controlled Senate that confirmed him.
So if they fight this too hard, they're really going to have to explain exactly what has changed outside of gaining more experience from what you're talking about. It is being reported, some reports are saying that the president has been asking nominees whether or not they would recuse themselves from the Russia investigation. That is not my reporting, but I'm repeating that of others. Would that be a question that you would ask?
Of course. I mean, that's the kind of question you would want to ask of anyone who's going into the top position at the Justice Department, and the president has a right to know that. I haven't seen anything in either his background or anything that he said that would be a reason for him to recuse himself from basically taking over supervision of the special counsel, which under Department of Justice regulations, it's supposed to be the Attorney General.
All right. As far as what we know about the Mueller investigation, I don't know if you could hear Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona talking about this, but what he liked about William Barr is that it may add a rudder, if you will, to the ship of the investigation into the president by, or his campaign by, Mueller. What's your thought on that?
No, I actually agree with that. I don't think the special counsel has been supervised in his work the way he should be, in a way that the Attorney General's office has an obligation to do. Look, maybe Mueller's got some kind of evidence that has not yet been publicly disclosed. That's certainly possible. But through today, not a single one of the indictments that he has put out, including the ones of Cohen, Flynn, and Manafort, had anything to do with or provided any evidence about any supposed collusion with the Russian government.
Right. Let's talk about what we could see drop today. I mean, I don't know what kind of neon light or what you could use to read through the redactions. I think you can't So there was so much that was redacted with Michael Flynn's sentencing memo from earlier this week. If we get two more like that on Manafort and Cohen, what is the point of releasing that information? It's got to have, like, what's the strategy? Get into the mind of Mueller if you can, and you should be able to do that because you've done your own investigations.
Well, the reason that the special counsel gave, for example, for redacting information from the Flynn memo is because he said it pertains to an ongoing investigation. Again, that may very possibly be true. But look, in the Manafort case today, we're supposed to get a sentencing recommendation memo from Mueller. And remember, about a week or so ago, Mueller filed a special pleading with the court accusing Manafort of having lied to the special counsel's office since he agreed to a plea deal. And the special counsel said, I will detail what those lies are in the report that's going to be filed today. So I think we're actually going to get information on what the supposed lies are that Mueller is accusing Manafort of.
All right. Hans, great to see you. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to bring everybody's attention now back to the lectern there in Kansas City. That is the Western Crown Center Hotel, and that's where we anticipate the president will step up at any moment. We're going to take a quick break now and come right back. Stay close.
Please welcome our nation's highest law enforcement officer.
With no college degree, you're not going anywhere.
Thanking the person who introduced him and the audience for being there. This is law enforcement officers and prosecutors in Kansas City, Missouri for the Project Safe Neighborhoods National Conference. Expect him to talk about a whole lot more. Let's watch together.
Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, following his unanimous confirmation by the United States Senate. During his tenure, he demonstrated an unwavering adherence to the rule of law, which the people in this room like to hear. There's no one more capable or more qualified for this role. He deserves overwhelming bipartisan support. I suspect he'll probably get it. I'm honored to be in Kansas City with the incredible men and women of law enforcement. I've been here a lot over the last couple of months. The U.S. attorneys, state, local prosecutors, police officers, sheriffs, deputies, and federal agents who keep our country safe. You keep America safe. And you maybe don't hear it enough or sometimes don't feel it enough. You do an incredible job. The people in this country know it and they love you. Just remember that. So true. On behalf of a grateful nation, I just want to say that we thank you, we salute you, and we stand with you 100%, all of us, me and all of us. We're here today to restore one of the most effective crime prevention strategies in America, Project Safe Neighborhoods. This initiative brings law enforcement, community groups, and local leaders together to get the most violent criminals in the most dangerous areas off the streets and behind bars. After many years of neglect, we are bringing back this life-saving program stronger than ever before. Today is the first nationwide meeting of Project Safe Neighborhoods in 8 years. And here with us is the man who started this visionary project all the way back in 2001, former Attorney General John Ashcroft. Where is John? Where is John? Great, John. I've been here a lot lately, John, huh?
Thank you.
Been here a lot. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for a great job. I also want to thank two members of my administration who are doing tremendous work. The head of ATF, Thomas Brandon, and the acting DEA administrator, Uttam Dillon. Please. Thank you, fellas. We're also joined by a great representative of the state, Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler. Helps me a lot. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Vicky. And we are especially excited to have with us the man who is your state's current Attorney General and newly elected United States Senator, that's why I've been here so much lately, Josh Hawley. Josh, thank you, Josh. And I will tell you, Josh really stepped up to the plate. You know, in life, you never know. You pick somebody, looks good, sounds good.
The president there in Kansas City, Missouri, talking about Project Safe Neighborhoods today and who started that program, John Ashcroft, of Missouri, and the Attorney General there, formerly. And he's thanking people who have worked so mightily for the program, originally also started by President George W. Bush. So we will monitor his talk today. We do know that the person who introduced him, interestingly enough, was the interim Attorney General, Matthew Whitaker. And as the president now has made a new nomination for the role of Attorney General and William Barr, we're going to move on and talk a little bit about that, monitor this, and if he toggles back from the Safe Neighborhoods conversation to some of the items that the president has been making big news on today, we'll take you back live. I want to bring in, who's been standing by, Congressman Darrell Issa on the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees. And again, the president there introduced, I want to talk politics for a second,
sure,
because the Democrats said that, oh no, we're going to start investigations into Matthew Whitaker and some of the stuff he said and blah, blah. And the president has taken that specter out of the hands of his political opponents, or critics, we should say, and now made a nomination that a lot of people are feeling that they can get behind today.
Well, it's exactly right. This is someone that today it would be unheard of, but even then it was rare, unanimous appointment. The important thing to all of us is it's not just that this is a superb senior attorney who has been some time ago the Attorney General. It's that this is somebody that both sides know can handle this large bureaucracy, that can button up and close up a lot of cases, and quite frankly, that people can trust without a doubt. Democrats would be disingenuous if they don't admit this, to oversee a number of prosecutions and investigations, including the special investigation of Mueller. That is important because this is somebody that goes beyond any question. It's an outsider relative to Trump. This is not a friend of Trump. He was not on the campaign. So the credentials are impeccable.
This is somebody that the president said he'd had his eye on from the very beginning. It is, by some estimations, and some critics, even within his own party, have called it an establishment pick. But he was nominated, as you said, 100% confirmed, and Democrats reported that. Let's move on and talk about James Comey and his testimony behind closed doors on the Hill. Why is it, Congressman Issa, that he so much wanted this to be public, and now we'll get the transcript that will come out in the next day or so? What was it that he didn't want to answer? Are there questions that you think that will get asked, won't get asked?
Well, he wanted a public spectacle, and he really wanted 5 minutes back and forth with members taking shots. He almost got it because he is going to have that transcript public very shortly. The one thing I can tell you today that surprised me is that under Trey Gowdy's questioning and John Ratcliffe's, it was the Justice Department, meaning the FBI attorney who's in there with him, that time and time again, I think to his pleasure, told him not to answer question after question fundamental to the investigations that brought him there. And so there's no question in my mind, we're going to be over at the FBI, we're going to be over at the Department of Justice, working out the details for a great many things that they came prepared not to answer.
Like what?
Well, I have to be a little careful. Let's just say in broad brush strokes, everything related to Hillary's investigation, everything related to how they got onto it and what their process was, everything related to the FISA warrants and the fake dossier, broadly, those are the areas in which time and time and time again, He's not answering. And I have to be careful because the transcript's not out, and I want to respect the process. But I think the one thing that's remarkable is, even though I can't tell you what he did say, I can tell you this large swath of very important information he's not saying.
Well, was he asked at all, and can you ask him at all about why employees who were showing bias in their text messages were not completely removed from the agency? I'm talking about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who were all over texting on their work devices about how they wanted to keep President Trump out of the White House.
When the transcript comes out, you're going to see incredible detail by Trey Gowdy of those questions, exactly the ones you're talking about, and you're going to be displeased, but maybe a little surprised at the answers.
Displeased? You can't give me...
You're not going to accept the answers as the answers that you would think a forthright individual would give.
All right. Can we also talk about leaking? Because that conversation was deepened when we found out. I mean, we knew that there were leaks of phone calls with world leaders and the president's early calls with those that were made early on in his presidency, and that sits in one lane. But when you have the FBI director leaking to a buddy whom he knew about certain things that we now know to be true, did you ask him why he did that?
Those questions are being asked, and this is exactly where Comey speaks out of both sides of his mouth. You know, he doesn't want to answer a lot of questions. Even when he answers, I would call them evasive. And then, as you say, he's been a master of leaking. And, you know, what's irritating, Harris, and I think what the American people really are upset about is the FBI will claim these privileges of ongoing investigation, which, by the way, is not a legal privilege, but it's one they claim. And then they will, for their own purposes, leak what they want to leak to get something, and then complain about leaks. You know, one of the things I learned in 18 years here in the House is that if you believe in transparency, you have to be consistent. The FBI is not consistent, and we in Congress have to make sure the executive branch becomes more consistent in either they don't tell anyone something because it really does protect sources and methods and lives, or it's open to the public at a reasonable time as their right to know, and we're not getting that.
All right. Congressman, I'm curious. You're about to leave. You're exiting. You're on the Oversight Committee. If you guys don't get the questions now, will we ever get the answers to some of these questions? A very quick last word.
The last word is, with Fast and Furious, when the Democrats were in control of the Senate and Senator Grassley was lied to, it was the majority in the House that worked with his staff to get the truth for him. The reverse has to be true. The majority in the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate, have to pick up whatever's being left behind for absence of leadership in the House, and I hope they will.
All right. Darrell Issa of the great state of California, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Speaking of James Comey, by the way, the Hillary Clinton email controversy apparently is back. A federal judge has given Judicial Watch the go-ahead to demand more documents. I'll talk with the president of that conservative group next about the answers he's looking for. Stay close. Well, the oddly never-ending Clinton email controversy takes another turn as federal judge now has ordered an additional fact-finding mission into whether Clinton's use of a private email system was a deliberate effort to thwart the Freedom of Information Act. That judge says that despite previous Clinton email investigations, conservative group Judicial Watch should be permitted to demand documents and additional testimony about the practice. Jillian Turner is live in Washington with more. So, Jillian, this is a really interesting turn.
One that not a lot of people saw coming either, Harris. So a U.S. District Court Judge, Royce Lamberth, has issued a new 11-page order addressing Clinton's use of a private email server when she was the Secretary of State. It includes a blistering critique of the State Department, the Justice Department, and of Clinton herself. The order insists, despite the multiple congressional and FBI investigations already completed, there's still questions that remain unanswered in the eyes of the law. Judge Lamberth says the court needs more facts in order to determine whether Clinton set up her private email server for the specific purpose of dodging the Freedom of Information Act. It's known as FOIA. Now, that's a law that allows American citizens to request access to any official government information anytime. Lamberth writes, the government shouldn't keep information confidential merely because public officials may be embarrassed by disclosure, because errors and failures may be revealed, or because of speculative or abstract fears. This ruling comes in response to a filing by conservative judicial advocacy group Judicial Watch, and it supports their bid to continue seeking access to official documents and even requesting further testimony from the people involved. Referencing the State Department, Judge Lamberth continues, the court takes no pleasure in questioning the intentions of the nation's most august executive departments, but it still remains unknown whether Clinton used a private email server to duck FOIA requests. Judicial Watch has responded to this order enthusiastically, perhaps not surprisingly, saying they'll hope it'll induce state and justice to be more cooperative. President of the group, Tom Fitton, adds he hopes the agencies will take the judge's criticism to heart. But Harris government insiders here in Washington tell Fox News there's a fat chance that that will happen.
I bet that was a direct quote.
Yes.
Jillian, great to see you. Thank you very much. And you've set me up perfectly for my next guest. The president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, joins me now. So, Tom, this is a victory for you. And some critics of the former Attorney General Jeff Sessions might even say it's a victory for the Justice Department to force them to do something that maybe they should have done before. What's your thought?
You know, one aspect of this ruling is the court didn't just criticize the Obama State Department and Justice Department, but highlighted the problem of this Justice Department continuing to defend the indefensible. He specifically talked about the chicanery of this Justice Department's continued defense and excuse-making for the misconduct of Hillary Clinton and the State Department and Justice Department previously. And he also talked about not being terribly convinced about Mr. Comey's testimony about the thoroughness of his Clinton email investigation. And it shows you the value, frankly, Harris, if we could promote Judicial Watch a little bit, of having an independent group like Judicial Watch focused on this, because Congress has dropped the ball here. The Justice Department, frankly, is on the other side of this, even during this administration. And, you know, the courts have been hoodwinked here, to use a phrase that the court highlighted in his decision. And so they're not going to back down. And now some people like Mrs. Clinton potentially are going to have to answer additional questions.
You know, I am curious about one point, because we have found out recently that Ivanka Trump also had her own personal email server with some emails on it, and she has talked substantively about how all of that sits on the White House server, and that nothing had been deleted. If critics of the Trump administration question about that comparatively to Hillary Clinton and what you're seeking, what is your answer?
Well, it frankly just highlights the egregious nature of what Mrs. Clinton did when you compare what happened with Ivanka Trump, where you had some emails about government business being sent on her private account before and after her work at the White House, emails by all accounts that were captured and preserved, which is in fact what they probably need to be. There's no legal prohibition on using personal emails for government business now and again. The difference here is Hillary Clinton specifically set up an email system to make sure no emails would be captured by the government and provided to investigators as long as she had anything to do with it, until, as the court highlighted, Judicial Watch caught them.
You know, there is another difference, too, that I see that I wonder, could your FOIA or could this investigation get to the bottom of? Will we ever know exactly how many and how the emails were destroyed? I mean, we've heard all sorts of stories about this was taken out into the woods and they attacked it and that server was destroyed. I mean, what are the facts that you know so far about that? That's important. It's the deletions. It's that sort of subterfuge accusation.
Well, at least half of the emails Hillary Clinton improperly took from the White House were destroyed, about 33,000 of them. As best we can tell, because we've been getting the emails that the FBI has been able either to recover or otherwise find, the FBI has only been able to find 5,000 of them. So there are, 27,000 emails still missing. And highlights the egregious nature, again, of what Mrs. Clinton did, this massive destruction of government records. She had no business taking any of these emails out of the State Department, and she did. And the American people deserve full answers. And frankly, the court, I think, is speaking for millions of Americans and demanding accountability here. And I hope the new Attorney General is paying attention to decisions like this, because this is what's going on in the Justice Department. They're defending Hillary Clinton while attacking President Trump on specious charges.
All right. Judicial Watch, as you said, important work that you were doing. FOIA is something that journalists use all the time. We'll be watching very closely. Thank you for coming on the program.
You're welcome, Harris. Thank you.
President Trump is trying to reassure a turbulent stock market as he continues negotiations with China. This is fear of a trade war sends the Dow into another spiral. Can the two sides reach an agreement? Stay close. After announcing his choices for two critically important posts, one of those being Attorney General. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Melissa Francis. Fox News contributor Lisa Booth. Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov. And break it up, make it interesting. Executive Vice President at the King's College in New York City, Brian Brinberg, is here, always on time for the big news days. Welcome.
Well, why wouldn't you want to be on time for this? You've got to be. There's so much to cover, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's
always a lot to cover.
Yeah. Right. Earlier today, and it's only noon on the East Coast, people. President Trump said he will nominate William Barr for Attorney General and State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert to be the next U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. The president calling William Barr his first choice since day one, and Heather Nauert would replace Nikki Haley if confirmed as U.S. ambassador to the UN. John Roberts is live outside the White House with more. John, busy. Hey, Waver.
Hey, good afternoon to you, Harris. Good afternoon to everybody else there on the couch. In picking William Barr, President Trump has picked someone with enormous experience, integrity, respect, and a lot of past bipartisan support, which is very important for the confirmation process. William Barr was Bush 41's Attorney General back in 1991 to 1993. He took the job when he was only 42 years old. Classic underachiever. Here's what the president had to say about him this morning.
When I went through the process of looking at people, and he was my first choice from day one, respected by Republicans and respected by Democrats. He will be nominated for the United States Attorney General, and hopefully that process will go very quickly, and I think it will go very quickly, and I've seen very good things about him.
The big question, what impact, if any, might this all have on the Mueller investigation? Certainly, Barr could not be described as a Trump acolyte. As a Bush appointee, that puts him firmly in the realm of the establishment, but he does hold some of the same points of view as the president. Last year, he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post saying that the president made the right call by firing the former FBI director, James Comey. Barr wrote, quote, "I know of no former senior Justice Department official, Democrat or Republican, who does not view Comey's conduct in July to have been a grave usurpation of authority." And here's what Barr told Neil Cavuto in May of 2017. Listen here.
President certainly is entitled to his choice as FBI director. And while I admire Jim Comey a lot, I think he's contributed a lot to the country. He's enormously gifted. He crossed the basic line back in July.
Barr also said last year that he saw more reason to investigate Hillary Clinton than any suspected collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Barr telling the New York Times in November of last year, quote, "To the extent it is not pursuing these matters, the department is abdicating its responsibility." The other big nomination, Harris, that you mentioned at the top, that of Heather Nauert for UN ambassador. We were told weeks ago that she was offered the job. Then it all went quiet for a while. Now it's all a done deal. She's been the spokeswoman at the State Department since the days of Rex Tillerson. Former Fox News correspondent, of course, did not have a great depth of foreign policy experience prior to joining the State Department. And at the State Department, her experience has mostly been in communications, not policy, but she's a quick study, and both the president and the Secretary of State like her very much. Here's what the president said about her this morning.
She's very talented, very smart, very quick, and I think she's going to be respected by all. So Heather Nauert will be nominated for the ambassador to the United Nations.
Now, an important difference in the job as it is described to me now, it is currently a cabinet-level position with Nikki Haley holding equal footing to that of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, even though the job of UN ambassador is under the auspices of the Secretary of State in the overall flow chart. But I'm told that it will go back to a sub-cabinet level position, much as it was in the Obama administration and in the Bush administration, the Clinton administration. You know, sometimes you would see John Negroponte out there for the Bush administration, but when it really got heated, you would see Colin Powell or Condoleezza Rice out there. That's the same formula this White House wants to use, put it back to a sub-cabinet level position. So Heather Nauert would do the day-to-day business, but when you got into the really big, heavy stuff, you'd see Mike Pompeo out there taking the lead. Harris?
Oh, that's an interesting detail. John Roberts, I'll wave back. Thank you very much for all the information. Good to see you, my friend. So, you know, as we look at this, let's start with William Barr and his relationship to